here and catching up with friends and fellow Americans of like mind. How many of you, this is your first CPAC? All right, great. Very good. So we got some new folks here. Well, I'm from Indiana, northeastern part of the state, and come from the 3rd District, which is Fort Wayne primarily, up in the northeastern part of the state. We were going to have Ron Johnson here as well, but I don't think he's going to make it. So it's just me and you all. And so the title of today's session is Thank You Millennials for Picking Up the Tab. So I see we have a good mix in the crowd. Most people millennials weren't as interested in hearing the bad news as what it is. But I was elected in 2010, was in the State House in Indiana for 8 years. We built a house in the Senate there. Had the opportunity to serve under Governor Mitch Daniels in Indiana. In Indiana, we were able to fix a lot of problems, fix a lot of the issues that we were dealing with. We had about $1 billion deficit in our state budget, and we do a biennial budget, so we have 2 years in our budgeting process, and we gave Governor Daniels the ability to balance it within 2 years. He actually balanced it within 1 year. It just shows you that if you have a solid leader, somebody who's willing to step up and to tackle issues within spending in the agencies, you can actually find a way to balance the budget. And so that was one of the neat things that I learned, is that if you have right type of conservative leadership, you can get the problem fixed. And that's one of the things that we don't have here in Washington. Of course, being in Indiana, we're kind of an island in the Midwest. We have Michigan had its issues to the north of us, obviously with the automotive industry. They are bouncing back. Things are getting better. You still see the model in Detroit. Detroit has a lot of problems in Detroit, but with the new governor in Michigan, they're getting things turned around and starting to have to compete. Illinois is, of course, to our west, and so it's always easy to joke about Illinois. I don't know if you know this, but in Illinois, people are dying to die in Illinois, because if they die there, they can stay politically active after they're gone. But we're really showing in the Midwest that if you have conservative leadership and you follow through, you can actually make a big difference. And I know there's some folks here from Indiana that have seen that. So it can happen. And after I was elected in 2010, getting to Washington and understanding the challenges that we have in our federal budget, it's very concerning. And knowing that if we don't start to fix things sooner rather than later, we're just not going to be able to recover. And so this issue actually is at the forefront of the challenges and the problems that we have in the federal budget. If you think of the budget as a pie, 2/3 of it is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and then you have interest on our debt and a variety of other programs. And then the other third is our discretionary spending, and half of that goes towards our military, and the other half towards a whole variety of other government programs. And so if you... microphone's muted. There we go. How's that? It's on. Oh, there. Can you hear me? All right. But so if you think about the budget in that pie shape, it shows you that most of this is on autopilot. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and some other entitlement spending is all on autopilot. And that's a broader conversation that we need to have as well, because I serve on the budget committee, and when you're only talking about 1/3 of the budget every year in the budgeting process and actually going through the appropriations process, we're leaving a lot of spending on the table that is not touched. And for us to actually get out of the hole that we're in, the first year, 2010, I think our deficit in our budget was about $1 trillion. That ran for $1 trillion deficit for about 3-4 years in a row. The lowest it got was this last year at $545 billion. And so we're borrowing all those dollars to pay for spending. And so, of course, as you all know, our spending is now up to $19 trillion.
our debt is up to $19 trillion, excuse me. And so that's projected by the Congressional Budget Office to head towards $30 trillion in the next 10 years. And that's where we all come in. I mean, we used to talk about, well, future generations are going to have to pay for this. That number is coming fast, coming towards all of us much, much faster. And if we don't do something sooner rather than later, we're just never going to be able to grow out of it. So we have two problems right now in the federal budget. And you have spending that's continuing to go up because with entitlement programs, if you qualify, you're eligible for the benefit. And if you, seniors are retiring at a much faster pace with baby boomers retiring, and so that cost is going to continue to go up. Fewer people are paying into the system compared to what it was designed when we first designed the programs. And so spending is going up, but the economy is slowing down. And this is due to Obama's economy. This is what we're dealing with the more red tape that businesses have to deal with. There's uncertainty. You have the debt that continues to weigh over all of us, because how do we pay that back? And as we were talking, I was talking to the gentleman in the back, can we get out of this? I believe we can. That point is getting closer to where it's going to be, it's much more difficult every day that we wait. It's going to be difficult to actually fix the problems faster than what we'd all like to be able to fix it. But if we could grow out of this, that would be a huge piece to all of this and a component to growing our economy. So there's more dollars coming into the federal treasury, and we can get towards balanced budgets. Unfortunately, politicians in Washington are used to 3% growth, and that we have not seen 3% growth in our economy for over 10 years. And we're now seeing a new normal, unfortunately, where we're seeing more like 2.3% growth. And the last quarter of last year saw 0.7% growth. And so when you don't have that growth, you don't have the revenue to cover the cost that the government has incurred. And so that's a huge problem, and why we're struggling with the budget this year, where when John Boehner left and cut the deal with the BBA, the Bipartisan Budget Act, he set those spending numbers higher, and with the economy now downgraded to less growth, we just don't have the dollars to spend like we thought we did. And so I consider myself a budget hawk and a defense hawk. I think those two can go together. And unfortunately, we're seeing the president has leveraged our military and said, if you're going to raise defense spending $1, you have to raise non-defense spending $1. And so with the sequester that came about back in 2011, our military has taken the greater part of the hits and cuts in the federal budget. So we're really squeezing things down in discretionary spending, so it's the mandatory spending that we're going to have to focus on. And I'm the youngest member of the Indiana delegation. I'm a Gen Xer, just outside of the millennial generation, but I think that what we're starting to see, even in voting patterns, you're starting to see that this is generational, and that younger people are becoming much more concerned about the debt and the deficits and the programs that the federal government has, not at the level that we'd all like to see. If you watch Bernie Sanders' promises and what he says, there's a lot of young people out there that are buying into that, and it's just not possible at the levels that we're currently at. And so what I would just mention is that, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, is that we have to start, the sooner we fix the programs, the much better off we'll be. And if we, as I said, if we start now, we could control it. We'd have to borrow more money to keep the commitments that we currently have to current beneficiaries. You would see a bubble in our borrowing, but eventually you would start to see the trajectory go down. And we've proposed several different programs. The budget that we first passed when I came in 2010 was the Path to Prosperity. Paul Ryan was the budget chairman at the time, and we had proposed $6.2 trillion in cuts over 10 years, and there was a variety of different ways to do that, but mostly geared towards our social programs. And one of the things that we all need to remember too is Social Security was designed to take care of grandma when she was retiring, and knowing that there was going to be people paying into the system to help fund the program, and people were expecting their money back. And so this is the other fight that conservatives have in Washington. Just this past budget deal, Social Security disability is broke. And in order to fix it, they went over and took money out of Social Security retirement, dumped it into Social Security disability, excuse me, made some modifications to the program, but didn't actually fix it long term. And so we're continuing to see this game where money's being moved from one account to another, and Social Security retirement was there. I believe it should be left alone to grow and to actually see a return on that investment to make sure that those who are retiring get their dollars back. Medicare is obviously a much more difficult program, much more complex with the reimbursements for health care, and the cost of health care obviously affects that. Medicare is the fastest growing expenditure that the federal budget has. And so that's why health care continues to be the big issue that we're going to have to fix, and it's not getting any better with Obamacare. And so we've proposed a premium support program where the federal government supports or does a premium subsidy or support to insurance, where people can then go out and buy insurance in a private marketplace. And if they choose a government option, it would be available, but they would also be able to use that support for private sector products as well. But we are not able to get that passed, obviously, with Obama in the White House. I had a conversation with the president at the White House when he invited the freshmen down in 2010. He only invited us down to the White House one time, and he must not wanted us to come back, because he hasn't invited us back since. But that said, we had a conversation about Medicare reforms, and he said to me and a couple of others that were standing there, it's like, if you go out and you start selling a plan, I'm going to try to come alongside and support or get Democrats to support it. Well, that's just never happened. And so there doesn't seem to be any serious effort by Democrats to actually make changes. Their answer is to just raise taxes. If you look at the president's budget this last year, it's just a disaster. It's just more taxes, more spending, and more government. And unfortunately, Republicans, I don't believe we fought this president the way that we should have. He's actually, under President Obama, his ideology has won, where he wants to see a bigger federal government and a smaller military. And that's exactly what's happened, because the military has taken all of the cuts in spending, and the rest of the federal government has continued to grow. And it's only going to create more problems. So the next president, the next Congress, we have huge challenges to deal with. And ultimately, it all falls back on us as Americans. And that's why millennials and every American at this point needs to be concerned about what these programs look like in order for us to actually have a strong economy. And so there's some millennials in the room. I'd be curious to hear from you all, your thoughts and your comments, and what you see on college campuses, see in your world. My belief is that a lot of people we don't see the danger yet, and don't feel the danger of these programs and where they're at right now, but it's coming sooner rather than later. I still believe if we start now, we could fix it and grow our way out of it, but we have to have the political will and the political backbone to actually do it. So with that, I'm just happy to open it up, and anybody have any questions? Yes? Why don't you say your name and where you're from?
Yeah, I'm Natalie Johnson. I'm from over the bridge in Fairfax, and I'm a reporter with the Daily Signal, so we're attached to the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah.
In terms of generational theft, that's, I guess, a phrase that's been floated around quite a bit recently, and even in the past few years, with the debt that millennials, people are my age, our age here in this room, are now facing, with the debt that was procured within generations prior to us, that and Social Security, as you're saying, we're paying into it, but we're not necessarily getting that money back.
Right.
How do we, or can we, fix that for our generation at that point, or is it we're kind of the lost generation in that?
I was when I was 18, I started my own IRA because I didn't trust that Social Security is going to be around. And also, we have to remember, too, that Social Security is a safety net program. It's not our main retirement, that, we should all be counting on. And so if you look at savings across our country, many Americans just aren't saving for retirement. And there's several reasons for that, especially in this economy. It's pretty tough to set dollars aside because we're not seeing wage increases like we should in a growing economy. But I think that a lot of it, to answer your question, is it's going to come down to those who are elected, to the politicians that we send to Washington. Are they willing to actually cast votes to make reforms to both Social Security and Medicare, to actually, either give us choices and let us handle our own dollars, or reform the programs where they actually meet the needs of those who really need the program. Social Security, I think, is a much easier fix because it's about the numbers. We're all living longer, which I think we can all celebrate that. My wife's grandmother, she just passed away, and she was 98 years old. But the program was designed at the time, average life expectancy was 65. And so people are living much longer. And so while we celebrate that, we have to be realistic as well and realize that we have to adjust those numbers accordingly. And there's also fewer people paying into the system today than what there was years ago. So we could talk about means testing. I think that's something else that if people want to forego their Social Security benefits, let's have that conversation. But we're not even having the conversation in Washington. I mean, Harry Reid said last year that just because Social Security goes broke in 2028, I think at the time, we've got lots of time to deal with it, and now's not the time to deal with it. I just think, the sooner the better. I mean, that just shows you Harry Reid's, the way he thinks and operates. And they want to see something collapse, and then, of course, the answer is going to be a bigger government program or some sort of government bailout. So, yes, and then we'll go back there.
Talking about what Harry Reid just said, do other Democrats out of Washington or any other, regardless of party politicians in Washington, have that same mindset where, oh, well, we have until 20 whatever, let's just deal with it then? Is that the common mindset, or?
That when people ask me what's been the biggest surprise that I've found in Washington since being here, it's the lack of urgency. It just doesn't seem like elected officials in Washington have any sense of urgency to fix these problems. And I don't know if it's just being younger and also coming from a business background. I want to get these things fixed and let's move forward, let's move on. But to me, it seems like there's such a willingness to kick the can down the road. And Obama has been the most difficult president to work with. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. And he refuses to sign any sort of reform measures. He threatens to veto everything. But I think that's where our leadership, we should be putting bills on his desk and showing the American people that it's President Obama who's stopping any sort of change rather than the Republican Party. I mean, they say that, they always use that tagline that the Republican Party is a party of no. That's been the Democrat Party that's been prohibiting any sort of reform to the federal government. There's more, sadly, there's more in the Democrat Party because they are big believers in big government. There are some in the Republican Party that it just isn't a priority to them that I think it should be. And so we just keep pushing. So, yes?
Well, so the Democrats, certainly they foster big government, but they're also big on redistribution of income.
Right.
How exposed are people's 401k plans? Because that's the biggest chunk of money there is, just lying around. And I got to think that they're projecting that this system is going to go bust by 2028, that gets put into play.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been bandied about already that maybe there should be a tax on IRAs, different forms of taxes on savings. And, we hear from our financial advisor friends all the time coming in and just beating that one back. That's always their number one priority, is don't let the federal government start taxing savings. And again, you know, Ronald Reagan said it, you know, you don't tax once you want more of. I mean, if you tax it, you're going to get less of it. And for example, my district in Northeast Indiana has the orthopedic capital of the world in Warsaw, Indiana, which we now have the medical device tax thanks to Obamacare. And companies in Indiana, Cook Medical Group, they said, we're not going to grow in the United States because of the cost of the of the taxes. Same with others up around Warsaw. They said, we're just not growing right now because of the millions of dollars in taxes that we have to pay as a company. And so it's out there. I don't want to say, you know, it'll never happen. That's why we need conservatives to fight back. And you know, I'm generally an optimistic person, but we need more conservatives elected in Congress. I mean, I offered the RSC budget every year, or the last 2 years, this year and last year, and it's the conservative budget that we offer on the House floor. And out of 247 Republicans in our conference, only 132 vote for the conservative budget. So that just shows you where we're at as a party, that we have to have people willing to say, look, this has got to happen sooner rather than later, and also put up the, you know, put any sort of stop to the left's tax increases, and they're always looking for a place to raise taxes. So, yes.
Just to go back to what you talked about, you know, there's no real sense of urgency, just as like a younger person in Congress, that you just kind of don't relate to that. With the new leadership of Speaker Ryan, who's on the budget committee, so he sees the issues in the budget, do you think there'll be a new sense of urgency that he kind of brings to the table as the leadership of the House?
Yeah. So if you couldn't hear in the back, the question was about Paul Ryan as a speaker. Will he bring a new sense of urgency? I think he will. You know, I was one of the 24 that voted against John Boehner for speaker at the beginning of last Congress, and it was simply because I didn't feel like the deals that were being cut with the White House were good for the country, and they weren't, you know, in conservative principles. I mean, we cut the military. They took the biggest hit in cuts. You know, they created that super committee that was supposed to fix all the problems. It was a failure. I think Paul Ryan for us as a party, the Republican Party going into this election, Paul Ryan can articulate the problems and articulate solutions better than anybody I've seen in Washington. And so him being the Speaker of the House and being in front of the cameras and talking to the American people on a daily basis is good for us. But he respects regular order in the House of Representatives, and that was one of the things that we didn't have under Speaker Boehner, where if bills come to the floor, then do we have an opportunity to offer amendments? And many times we were shut out of the amendment process. I mean, there was a lot of us that said, we might as well go home. These bills are being drafted in the Speaker's office and are taken to the floor under a closed rule. What are we here for? And so there's a deep frustration that really led up to Speaker Boehner leaving the Speaker's office because of that frustration. So Paul, I think, is doing a much better job, and he's having his own challenges because of what was left over from the past Speaker. But you know, I think if we can elect a conservative president and keep the House and the Senate, we're going to be able to start fixing these problems. So, yes.
For things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, obviously, looking at history, they were created during liberal presidents. Social Security was Roosevelt, Medicare, Medicaid, I believe, was Lyndon Johnson. I'm pretty sure both of them had liberal Congresses during that. Obviously, basically just like social programs. That, to me, just looking at history, it seems like they were doomed to fail from the start. What would be the bad thing about getting rid of them? Because, I mean, we'd save a lot of money on national health was our whole problem with the national debt and everything. Or at least maybe like trying to privatize them, I guess, if we couldn't get rid of them. I don't know, politicians ever seem to talk about that, but it just seems like they were doomed from the start, that we never would ever be able to pay for them at some point in time, and we're seeing that now. Social Security is supposed to go bankrupt by, what, 2028, you said? And, I mean, I just don't see a real true way to save it.
Yeah. You know, I mean, to answer the question, I think if you just stopped it today, I don't think that would be healthy for, you know, a lot of seniors who did plan on those benefits. What we've proposed is that if you're, we started back in 2010, if you're 55 and above, your benefits they're going to stay the same. They're going to be there. If you're 55 and below, 54 and below, you're going to see a different model. And whether it's private savings accounts, whether it's health savings account based premium support, those you got to push more of this back to the state level and also to us as individuals. And again, I mean, these programs were not designed to be the primary retirement or health insurance programs for the American people. But you know, when every program that the federal government or any government designs, it's always with good intentions. But we're now at a point where we have 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. I mean, you see the charts, and our spending, it's going to go, it just goes like this. And so we just can't sustain that. And you're going to have to find some sort of alternative to let people start taking on their own retirement accounts or healthcare choices rather than it being just the federal government's. So, yes.
This might be a little off topic, but it's something that is really personal to me. A lot of my friends back home are really skeptical of capitalism, and they're set on voting for Sanders. How in the world do I address that? I mean, they've benefited from capitalism their entire life.
Yeah.
Their parents.
Yeah.
I don't understand their distrust of it, but it's just that brainwashing that's in public school.
Yeah.
But how do I begin addressing that and trying to change their mind so that they don't vote for Sanders?
Yeah. So the question was about capitalism and younger people becoming skeptical of capitalism. Like the left loves to do, they like to take words that have, positive meanings and turn them into a negative. I talk about free enterprise, talk about free markets rather than just capitalism, because that's what ultimately, if we have choices, I bet just about every young person that you're talking to loves choices. Whether it's AT&T or Verizon or Ford or Chevy or a Toyota. We all like choices. But if you follow the Bernie Sanders model, you're going to get one choice. And that's where I think when socialism actually sets in, then everybody's going to realize, oh, that's not what we thought we were getting. And it's easy and irresponsible for Bernie Sanders to get up and say we're going to give free education. It's just not possible. Somebody's going to have to pay for it. And so I think that I would always approach it from a free market standpoint, a free enterprise position, and say we all want choices. When there's competition, you're going to get a better product. And unfortunately, whenever government gets involved in something, it takes the competition out of an industry. I come from an ag background, and government continues to be involved in agriculture. And if we would move it to a free market, a real free market, free enterprise system, you're going to see that we all have more choices. And I want the federal government to focus on market access, open up more markets around the world for products. Don't pick winners and losers and who's going to have access to participate and who doesn't, because then it comes down to political cronyism. And unfortunately we have capital cronyism, and that's why people are getting a bad taste in their mouth, is because government is picking certain businesses to be a winner and others to be losers. And so that's...
They don't like the very system that they're championing. They don't know it yet.
Yeah. So I would approach it from free markets, free enterprise, and that we all like choices, and competition helps us get. So, yes.
So has there been any floor or committee discussions about either raising the Social Security tax rate on those making over $250,000 or lowering or entirely cutting benefits for the current retired rich? Is it also somehow possible to refund some of the money to current workers on a yearly basis and then they can invest it in an IRA, so a half privatizing of the system?
There has not. I mean, there's not been any discussion on Social Security reforms since I've been in Washington. I mean, we'll have some vague discussions about it during some budget conversations, but there has been no real proposal brought to the floor. And part of it goes back to, first of all, we have to have leadership out of the White House. On an issue like this, you're going to have the White House engaged, and the president's not interested. And oftentimes that we don't, in our budgeting process with discretionary versus non-discretionary spending, we just don't talk about Social Security. And we keep saying that's what we're going to have to talk about in restructuring what Social Security looks like. And we can do it, for those who are 54 and below. That number's higher now. I think it's because we haven't done anything. It's now up around 57 or 58. But if we would actually be willing to say, hey, we're gonna do this, then you'd have that conversation on the floor and actually debate ideas. But we haven't had that. So, yes, sir.
In the last, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years, I don't know how long, we've been sending one big bill to the president at the end of the year, for next year.
Yeah.
Which allows him to veto or accept it. If he vetoes it, then he blames the Republicans. He certainly can do it now because the Republicans control both houses. Are you right now really focusing on giving him a dozen or so bills, transportation, periodically through the year?
Yeah.
So as he vetoes one, you can revise it and send it back, but people will start seeing who's vetoing what.
Yeah. That's the discussion we're having this week, and the conversation we've been having for the last month is how do we get a budget passed so we can get to the 12 appropriations bills to actually get them past the House and the Senate and send them to the president. Since I've been in Congress, we have not passed 12 appropriations bills in 1 year. It always has come down to a cromnibus or an omnibus spending bill at the end of the year. And that's the effort back to Paul Ryan wanting to get to regular order so we can do the appropriations bills and send them to the Senate and actually get them to the president's desk. Last year, we had done about 3 or 4 appropriations bills, and then the whole Confederate flag issue came up, and Democrats were offering amendments related to the Confederate flag, and the Republican leadership just shut everything down. Again, I mean, we're here to cast tough votes, and so even if it's related to the Confederate flag, I think you have to move forward because the bigger picture in all of this is getting a federal budget appropriated and getting the appropriations bills out of the House and over to the Senate. And because of that, we basically just chucked the whole budgeting process and went to the omnibus that passed at the end of last year, right before John Boehner left. So our discussion right now is because of the Boehner deal, the spending numbers are higher, and many of us did not support that higher number. And so we're saying we've got to fall back down to levels prior to the Boehner deal and start there because so many of us didn't support it. Why would we support it? And so trying to get that top line number in the budget passed so we can go to the appropriations process is a desire that we all want, but we don't want to start with that higher number. And what our effort is can we start going in and making reforms to the mandatory spending in Medicare or making reforms to Social Security to actually start getting savings to pay for this, massive $3.75 trillion budget. Because under the current budgeting process, again, like I said at the beginning, we're only dealing with about a little over $1 trillion in the non-mandatory spending. So getting a budget passed is a priority for us, but getting it passed at the lower levels is the bigger priority, so that way we don't just continue to see spending going up under Republican control in the House and the Senate.
But since it's controlled by Republicans, can't they do that right now? Can't they say, hey, here's our new budget, pass 12 bills, focus on that level?
Yes, we could. The president's going to threaten to veto it, but we have to. That's right. That's what I say. I mean, I think we should drop the number down, pass 12 appropriations bills, send it to the Senate, and work through the process. That's why our founding fathers set up this process, and it's worked for years. But when you throw the process out and you try to control everything from the top, you're not going to find support for it because people aren't involved in the debate and discussion at the level that we all want to be. And you take the voice away from the American people at that point. So yes, we could. To answer your question, I think we should lower the number down. Even if I would like to find a way to start making reforms to the other 2/3 of the budget that we don't have access to. It's all on autopilot. That's why when we come to the end of the budget year and there's all this talk of a government shutdown, most of the government continues to operate because it's 2/3 of it's on autopilot. What takes the big hit is the military. That's what's left on the chopping block. So we need budget reform all the way around in the way that we budget in Congress to actually fix the outcomes. So there's somebody over here.
Yes, you're right that both the Social Security and Medicare reform have been off the radar screens for years now.
Yeah.
The federal budget deficit's been off the radar screens for years now. And you're right that takes some leadership at the top to make that happen. But also, I'm hoping that there can be more action on the individual congressman level. There's some great resources out there. I've never seen a congressman on any one of the talk shows hold up a copy of the federal financial report and say, have you read this? Have you seen how dire the situation is? If you disagree with this, do you disagree with the independent auditors who said this is the truth?
Yeah.
And I'm hoping we can see more of that. Has there been any talk about being more proactive in this regard?
I mean, you know what? I talk about the debt all the time. I think the greatest threat to this country is $19 trillion of debt and the long-term liabilities that we have beyond that. That's why I'm here, because we can't have a strong military if we don't have a healthy economy and a budget that's under control and balanced. Thomas Jefferson's greatest regret regarding the Constitution was that there wasn't a balanced budget amendment. This is the threat to the country, and nobody seems to really talk about it to the level that some of us do. I mean, if we're on the budget committee, you're generally talking about it. But you have to be able to get back to this gentleman's question over here is, are we even talking about Social Security reforms? Are we talking about Medicare reforms? When you don't have the platform in the House chamber, it's hard to actually get the press to pay attention to it. So that's why floor time is an important piece to all of this, to get Americans to actually, for all of us to start paying attention to the fact that, hey, they're discussing reforms to Medicare. So what does that look like? But when you don't have the discussion on the floor, we don't talk about it. We talk about debt ceiling increases. I think that's where we come closest to actually having a broader conversation, is when we get to a debt ceiling increase. And but again, we just take it right up to the time where all of a sudden the sky's going to fall because we don't raise the debt ceiling. Oh well, we just better do it within the next week. And we don't even have the broader discussion of reforms to spending in the federal budget. So there's some of us that we do try, but it's just not something that the press talks much about. So, yes.
When you look at how well conservatives have done, 2010, 2014, in the midterms, they took a lot of governorships, a lot of state legislatures. So in your opinion, looking at the landscape in politics, if we're fortunate enough to get a Republican president, what are the chances of something like a balanced budget amendment coming forward? Or do you think like it would be a campaign thing where, okay, they get elected and it just goes by the wayside?
That's why Donald Trump is running and doing so well, because I think people are just saying, look, both parties have said you were going to fix the problems in Washington, and we're further in debt. We still have Obamacare. Dodd-Frank is a catastrophe for our capital markets and for actually having access to capital. And small businesses are struggling. Things aren't getting any better. Wages aren't going up. Families are having a more difficult time making ends meet because this economy is not growing. It really comes down to us being involved and engaged and in helping whoever we elect, that we hold them accountable and that they actually do what they say they're going to do. But sadly, that's the frustration with a lot of people right now, is that they said, I helped get so-and-so elected, and they went to Washington and nothing's changed. it's not any better. And so that's why elections matter. I mean, it matters so much. And I'm looking to work with conservatives, people who want to actually fix the direction of the country. And when Obamacare was passed under Nancy Pelosi in 2009 and then Dodd-Frank in 2010, a lot of this was just strictly partisan. There's a lot of bad feelings from that period that's still left over in the House. I see it in the House yet. And so when people are still pointing fingers at each other, that's not helpful either, because we just keep going further in debt. And our spending is out of control, and we're not making good policies not being talked about. So it has to come from the people on this one, and I think that's what you're seeing in this election cycle. So we'll take one more, and then we'll wrap it up. Yes.
Jumping back to Social Security just for a second, with reform, I've heard a lot about means testing, and some candidates are talking about means testing. How do you feel about that? Because as a young person, I think that's very discouraging to hear that I'm going to be disciplined for, doing better, and that discourages young millennials from doing better. So would you ever support any kind of means testing, or what's your feelings towards that?
Yeah, I would support some sort of means testing at a higher level. I mean, does Bill Gates need Social Security? I don't think he does. And back to what I said earlier, it doesn't have to be a forced, people shouldn't be forced into it, because if you paid into it, you should be able to get your dollars back. But if people want to forego their Social Security benefits for maybe tax credit or some other sort of alternative benefit, then we should talk about it. But you have to have the conversation to know what ideas are out there, what people are willing to support and what they're not willing to support. But I do think that if Social Security is designed to be a social safety net, then there should be a point somewhere, and I don't know what that number is, but let's just say it's $1 million. And I want to make sure that no one's punished or for saving, because again, we want to incentivize saving. But is there a point when people could say, look, I don't need it, we're fine, we've had success in life or whatever, that they can opt out? I think that would be a part of the conversation to have. But again, if people have paid into it expecting their dollars back, that's the commitment and the promise that should be kept. So, all right, well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it, and thank you. Hope you all have a good rest of your time here at CPAC. All right, yeah. It's great to meet you guys. Thanks for coming. Yeah, you too. I better shut this off.